Welcome. Get ready, because today we are embarking on an absolute high-velocity sprint.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about running straight through the exact moments where traditional financial thinking it completely shattered.
Right into a million pieces.
Exactly. I am talking about those rare lightning strike epiphanies that fundamentally rewrite how you see the world, the economy, and honestly, your own life. So, welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. It is specifically designed for you, the listener.
And this is a really special one, right?
Oh, it's a massive one.
Yeah.
This is part one of an exclusive four-part miniseries where we are taking a giant magnifying glass to the foundational text of modern financial philosophy. We're talking about Robert Kiyosaki's legendary book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Which is, it's arguably one of the most debated and heavily influential financial books of the last half century.
Absolutely. But here is the catch, and this is crucial for our mission today. We are restricting our focus entirely, and exclusively, to the genesis of this mindset.
Just the beginning.
Yes. We are only looking at the introduction through to the very end of Chapter 2, which is Lesson 2. We are not looking ahead. We are hunting for the core architectural blueprints of wealth, stripping away all the dry, boring accounting jargon and translating these massive abstract concepts into vivid 3D mental imagery.
Stuff your brain simply cannot unsee.
You literally won't be able to unsee it. We want to keep the pacing dynamic, highly stimulating, and incredibly focused. A true dopaminergic sprint for the ADHD brain.
I love that. And before we launch into this highly energetic exploration, we do need to lay down a quick but very important framework.
Lay it on us.
The ideas we're going to unpack today are radical. They aggressively challenge traditional societal structures, the way we view the education system, the standard trajectory of climbing the corporate ladder.
The whole 9-to-5 grind.
Exactly. The very concept of secure employment, and even how the middle class uses taxation and debt.
Yeah.
But our goal here is not to take a political or ideological side.
Right. We are Switzerland today.
We really are. We're not here to endorse a left-wing or a right-wing agenda, nor are we here to pass judgment on the merits of formal education. We are simply acting as your impartial guides.
Impartial, objective guides.
We're here to unpack the highly provocative ideas presented in the text, examine them from all angles, and see what makes them tick. Just looking at the mechanics of the philosophy completely objectively.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture the scene. It is Hawaii, the 1950s.
Beautiful.
Lush, tropical, but with a stark, often unspoken economic divide. Hawaii wasn't even a state yet. It was a territory heavily influenced by the plantation economy.
Right, you had the wealthy plantation managers and business owners on one side.
And you had literally everyone else on the other. And right in the middle of this, we have a young 9-year-old boy, Robert, caught directly between two towering, highly charismatic, deeply influential figures in his life. These are his two dads.
And the contrast here is it's brilliant.
It's wild. On one side, you have his biological father, who the book refers to as Poor Dad. Now, this man is the ultimate gold standard academic success story.
Oh, he is the blueprint.
We are talking highly educated, holding a PhD, completing 4 years of undergrad work in less than 2 years. He went to Stanford, the University of Chicago, Northwestern University, all on full financial scholarships.
He is the guy who played the traditional game perfectly and won.
Yes. He is the head of education for the state of Hawaii.
He represents the absolute pinnacle of the meritocracy.
Yeah.
The belief that if you study hard, get the best grades, and secure a safe government or corporate job, you have succeeded.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have his best friend, Mike's dad, the rich dad. And this man is an 8th grade dropout.
An 8th grade dropout.
No prestigious degrees, no academic accolades. He didn't go to Chicago or Stanford. He is a self-made guy building a localized empire of convenience stores, restaurants, and construction companies.
What is incredibly powerful about this setup is the psychological collision it creates.
It's a complete crash.
Having two dads forced the author into a unique and, frankly, burdensome cognitive position. He couldn't just blindly accept advice the way most children do.
Because kids usually just absorb it, right?
Yeah, children generally absorb their parents' worldview by complete osmosis. But Robert was forced to constantly compare, contrast, and ultimately choose. And the contrast in their core beliefs, particularly regarding money, was absolutely staggering.
Night and day.
It wasn't just a slight difference in opinion, it was a fundamental opposition in worldview.
It really was. Just take their views on the root of evil, for example. The highly educated poor dad firmly believed and frequently stated that the love of money is the root of all evil.
Right.
It's a perspective that frames money as a corrupting influence, something to be wary of, something that taints the purity of academic or intellectual pursuits.
But the rich dad, the eighth-grade dropout, flipped it entirely.
Upside down.
His core belief was that the lack of money is the root of all evil, which is a profoundly provocative statement. Rich Dad wasn't saying money itself was a deity to be worshipped. He was observing the stress, the broken marriages, the compromised ethics, and the sheer desperation that arises when a family cannot meet its basic needs.
He saw the reality of poverty.
He viewed the lack of resources as the catalyst for societal decay, whereas Poor Dad viewed the pursuit of resources as the catalyst. That is a massive philosophical divide for a 9-year-old to navigate.
A foundational earthquake for a kid. And it gets even more intense when we look at how they process desire and limitations. This is where the book introduces a really vivid mental exercise.
Oh, the phrasing.
Yes, the phrasing. When faced with something they wanted to buy but didn't have the cash for, the poor dad had a habit of saying, "I can't afford it."
That's the full stop.
A statement of fact. But the rich dad absolutely forbade those words in his house. He insisted the question must be, how can I afford it? Now, let's translate this into a visual because this concept is the bedrock of everything that follows.
Let's do it.
Imagine your brain is a massive, incredibly complex, hyperactive factory assembly line. You've got conveyor belts whirring, robotic arms moving, gears grinding, brilliant neon lights buzzing overhead.
Just massive kinetic energy.
Pure kinetic problem-solving energy. When you utter the statement, "I can't afford it," it is the equivalent of walking into that factory, strolling right up to the main breaker, and yanking the massive red power switch.
Bam.
Bam! Everything goes pitch black, the gears grind to a halt. You have literally ordered your brain to shut down and go to sleep.
What's fascinating here is the psychological mechanics of that shutdown. The phrase "I can't afford it" is a statement of finality. It lets you off the hook.
It's easy.
It's so easy. It requires absolutely no cognitive effort, no creativity, no risk. You state the fact, you feel a momentary pang of disappointment, and you move on.
You go watch TV.
Right. But formulating a question, how can I afford it, forces the brain into a state of hyper-engagement. It is quite literally mental resistance training.
Oh, I like that. Mental resistance training.
The rich dad was fanatical about exercising the mind, calling it the most powerful computer in the world. He believed that the stronger your brain gets through this specific type of exercise, the more wealth you can generate.
It's the difference between sitting on the couch and going to the gym, but for your financial capability.
Precisely. Conversely, automatically defaulting to "I can't afford it" is a symptom of deep mental laziness. And here's where it connects to the bigger picture. That mental laziness doesn't just cost you in the moment.
It compounds.
It compounds over decades. One dad exercised his financial brain daily. The other put his to sleep to avoid the stress of the problem. Over a lifetime, that creates a seemingly insurmountable chasm in financial reality.
And this brings us to Robert Frost.
The poet.
Yes. The author uses Frost's iconic poem, The Road Not Taken, as his ultimate framework for understanding this agonizing choice. Imagine being 9 years old, loving both of these men deeply, respecting them both, but realizing you have to diverge.
You have to pick a path.
He chose the road less traveled by. He chose to ignore the advice of the man with the Stanford and Chicago pedigrees, his own biological father, and instead listen to the 8th grade dropout.
That is an incredibly heavy psychological burden for a kid.
So heavy. He's essentially rejecting his family's generational ethos, but as the poem says, it made all the difference. He had to actively choose his mental programming.
And that active choice leads us directly to the inciting incident of his financial education. It's 1956. Young Robert and his best friend Mike attend a public school that, due to the specific drawing of district lines in their Hawaiian town, is populated mostly by the children of plantation managers, doctors, and bankers.
The wealthy kids.
The wealthy kids. And then there's an incredibly sharp moment of exclusion. A classmate named Jimmy is going to his family's beach house for the weekend. Jimmy's mom pulls up in a brand new Cadillac.
A shiny new 1956 Cadillac.
3 kids get invited. Robert and Mike are left standing there on the sidewalk. Why? Because, as they are explicitly told by the other kids, they are the poor kids. You can practically feel the emotional heat of that rejection. It's that raw childhood humiliation that burns itself into your memory forever.
Absolutely. It's a complete gut punch. So what do? Robert goes to his highly educated poor dad and asks the ultimate question, Dad, can you tell me how to get rich?
And the answer is so academic.
It is the most literal, academically constrained advice ever. Use your head, son, and learn to make money.
Which is terrible advice for a 9-year-old.
Because they take it completely literally. This leads to what is honestly a hilarious and highly visual scene. Imagine these two kids running around the neighborhood, aggressively knocking on doors, asking neighbors to save their used toothpaste tubes.
Back when they were made of lead.
Exactly. Back in the 1950s, toothpaste tubes weren't plastic. They were made of lead. So they are hoarding these toxic tubes in a cardboard box. Then they set up a legitimate miniature smelting operation in the driveway.
A literal foundry.
They've got a coal fire going. They are melting down this toxic lead in a steel pot. And they are pouring the molten metal into plaster of Paris molds they made of a 5-cent piece.
They're covered in white dust, sweating over a fire, literally forging nickels.
They aren't learning finance. They are running an illegal counterfeiting ring.
It is the perfect collision of raw, unbridled ambition and total ignorance.
It really is.
Robert's poor dad and a friend of his actually have to sit the boys down and explain what the word counterfeiting means, and that the federal government generally frowns upon private citizens creating their own currency, regardless of how much initiative they show.
They don't care how entrepreneurial you are.
No, they do not. But this failure, this initial spark of action, is what opens the door. Poor dad admits he doesn't know how to make money, but he points Robert toward Mike's dad, the rich dad. He explains that Mike's dad is building an empire, buying up warehouses and businesses.
So the boys go to Rich Dad, and he agrees to teach them how to make money. But he sets a trap.
A brilliant trap.
A highly provocative trap. He offers to teach them, but not in a classroom. He tells them that school teaches you how to be an employee, but life teaches you by pushing you around.
Life pushes you around.
Yeah. He demands they work for him, dusting cans and stocking shelves in one of his convenience stores for 3 hours every single Saturday. The pay, a measly 10 cents an hour.
Wow.
Even in 1956, 30 cents for a Saturday morning was insulting. A single comic book cost 10 cents back then. He forces them into this tedious, low-paying manual labor until the frustration boils over.
And it really doesn't take long. After a few weeks of giving up his precious Saturday mornings to breathe in dust for 30 cents, Robert is ready to quit.
Now, I have to push back a little here because to a modern listener, this scenario sounds incredibly harsh. We are talking about a grown man, a successful business owner, intentionally underpaying a 9-year-old child to the point of severe frustration. It feels borderline exploitative. How does the book justify that extreme tactic to a reader today?
That is a very valid critique, and it's a point where a lot of readers initially bristle. If we view it purely through a modern labor lens, it looks terrible.
Right.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of the text's philosophy, Rich Dad is demonstrating a profound, albeit severe, educational method. When Robert finally confronts Rich Dad, demanding a raise and accusing him of exploitation, Rich Dad is actually thrilled.
He's happy about it.
He tells Robert, "I'm glad you got angry." Why? Because true learning requires energy, passion, and a burning desire. He defines passion as anger and love combined.
Anger and love?
Yes. If Robert had just passively accepted the 10 cents an hour, Rich Dad would have known he lacked the internal fire necessary to break out of the standard financial mold. Most people, when it comes to money, are driven by a desire to play it safe. They want security. They are directed by fear, not passion.
They just want the steady paycheck.
Rich Dad intentionally engineered a situation to ignite that passion through frustration, to simulate the exact frustration most adults feel at their jobs, but to do it early enough that the boy could learn from it.
He essentially fast-forwarded the midlife crisis to age 9.
Exactly. He wanted Robert to taste the trap of the employee early. And once he has that fire, once Robert's anger is palpable, Rich Dad introduces them to the ultimate, terrifying landscape of adult life, the rat race.
Yes, let's visualize this. The rat race. Imagine a massive, relentless, neon-lit hamster wheel, but it's shaped like a steep, 3D topographical mountain.
A mountain hamster wheel.
You wake up and you start running up this mountain because behind you is a terrifying, massive boulder rolling upwards, constantly threatening to crush you.
It defies gravity.
It does. And that boulder is fear. Specifically, the fear of not having money, the fear of not paying bills, the fear of being fired, the fear of starving. So you run, you get a job, you get a paycheck, and the fear subsides for a second. The boulder pauses.
Just from it.
But then looking up the mountain, you see these flashing, blinding neon lights. It's desire. It's greed. It's the societal conditioning that says, you worked hard, you deserve a reward.
Treat yourself.
Treat yourself. It's a shiny new car, a bigger house in the suburbs, a boat, a luxury vacation. So you spend the paycheck to grab the neon lights. Now the money is gone. You are broke again. And the boulder of fear starts rolling right on your heels.
So you run harder.
You work longer hours, you hope for a promotion, you get a raise, and you immediately use that raise to chase bigger, more expensive neon lights. Fear and desire. Over and over. Wake up, go to work, pay bills. Wake up, go to work, pay bills.
It's a phenomenal visualization of a devastating systemic cycle. And what keeps people trapped on that mountain is a total lack of self-awareness regarding their own emotions.
They don't even see the mountain.
No. Rich Dad uses another deeply striking analogy to explain this emotional blindness. He describes a donkey pulling a heavy cart down a dirt road. The owner of the donkey is sitting comfortably on the cart, holding a long stick, dangling a bright orange carrot just inches in front of the donkey's nose.
Always just out of reach.
Exactly. The owner knows exactly where they are going. The owner is in control. But the donkey is just blindly chasing an illusion. It never sees the whole picture. It just thinks, if I take one more step, I get the carrot.
But tomorrow, there will just be another carrot.
Rich Dad is trying to show these young boys that the paycheck, the new toys, the promise of corporate security,
Yeah.
these are just the carrot. If you let fear and desire dictate your actions without ever stopping to question where the cart is actually heading, you become the donkey. You react emotionally instead of thinking logically. You let your emotions do your thinking.
Which is such a massive trap. We all think we're being logical when we say, I need a better job or I need a raise. But Rich Dad argues that is just the fear talking. It's the donkey reacting to the lack of a carrot.
It's reactive, not proactive.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Rich Dad doesn't just explain the trap, he forces them to figure a way out of it. And he does it with the most counterintuitive, jarring move imaginable. After Robert demands more money, Rich Dad takes away the 10 cents.
He takes it all.
He tells them, if you want to learn how to have money work for you, rather than you working for money, you now have to work in my store for absolutely nothing. 0 cents an hour.
0.
Imagine the problem-solving factory in their brains suddenly short-circuiting. How do you make money if you aren't getting paid? But this is the crucial pivot. By completely removing the paycheck, by entirely eliminating the carrot, he removes their mental blinders. They are no longer focused on the meager wage. Their brains are forced to look around the environment differently.
It's a masterstroke of forced perspective shifting. As long as they were getting paid 10 cents, their minds were entirely consumed by the inadequacy of that 10 cents.
They're just mad about the dime.
Exactly. The illusion of the wage occupied all their cognitive bandwidth. Without the distraction of working for money, their minds are finally open to seeing opportunities to have money work for them. And the aha moment arrives a few weeks later in the very store where they are working for free.
Right in front of them.
They notice the store manager, Mrs. Martin, doing something peculiar. She's taking the unsold comic books, cutting the top half of the covers off, keeping the covers to return to the distributor for credit, and throwing the rest of the actual comic book into a cardboard box to be discarded.
Their brains immediately lock onto this box of discarded value. The sparking factory is back online.
It is humming. They wait for the distributor to arrive and they ask him a vital question. Can we have these coverless comic books? The distributor agrees, but with one strict legal caveat. You can have them, but you cannot sell them.
So what do? They don't sell them, they build an empire.
An absolute empire.
They take these hundreds of discarded comics, clean out a spare unused room in Mike's basement, and create a neighborhood comic book library.
Yeah.
But here's the genius part. They don't just sit there running it themselves. They're 9 years old, they still have to go to school and do homework.
They have other things to do.
So they hire Mike's younger sister, paying her $1 a week to be the head librarian. Her job is to check the kids in, make sure they don't tear the pages, and keep order. They charge the neighborhood kids 10 cents for admission to the room.
Which is the price of one new comic book.
Right. But for that single dime, a kid could read as many comics as they wanted in 2 hours. Since most kids could read 5 or 6 comics in that time, it was a massive bargain for the customers and an absolute cash machine for Robert and Mike. They were pulling in $9.50 a week in 1956. That is a fortune for a kid back then.
And we really have to pause and unpack the deep significance of this moment because it goes far beyond a cute story about childhood enterprise. The shift here is monumental.
It's every...
We're watching the transition from employee to business owner. For the very first time in their lives, they have successfully built an asset. Even when they were sitting in a classroom at school or playing baseball or sleeping in their beds, that basement library was open and generating cash flow.
Without them being there.
They had successfully decoupled their time from their income. They weren't hauling buckets of water by the hour anymore. They had built a pipeline. They had taken control of their financial destiny by creating a system that functioned entirely independently of their direct physical labor.
When you think about it in a modern context, it's brilliant. The comic book library is essentially an early version of a subscription model or a SaaS, software as a service business.
It really is.
They aren't selling a physical product. They are selling access to a curated environment. It's the exact same model as Netflix or a modern gym membership. Build the infrastructure once and let the system generate the revenue. They literally found a glitch in the financial system and capitalized on it.
That is a perfect parallel. The medium changes from coverless comics to digital streaming rights, but the foundational blueprint of wealth remains exactly the same. Build or acquire systems that generate cash flow without requiring your constant physical presence.
But here's the reality check. Building that initial pipeline is just step one. You have to know how to maintain the plumbing, or the whole thing bursts. And that brings us to lesson 2 of the book, Why Teach Financial Literacy.
The boring stuff, supposedly.
Supposedly, Rich Dad hits the boys with a massive historical reality check to prove that making money isn't enough. He tells them a famous cautionary tale from 1923. A group of our country's greatest leaders and richest businessmen held a meeting at the Edgewater Beach Hotel in Chicago. We are talking about the absolute titans of industry.
Yes. Let's look at exactly who was at that meeting because it emphasizes the scale of the tragedy.
Yeah.
You had Charles Schwab, the head of the largest independent steel company in the world.
A giant.
Samuel Insull, the president of the world's largest utility company. Richard Whitney, the president of the New York Stock Exchange. Albert Fall, member of the president's cabinet. And Leon Fraser, the president of the Bank of International Settlements. These were the men who controlled the wealth of the Roaring Twenties.
And the punchline of that story is incredibly grim. Just a couple of decades later, almost all of those men met disastrous ends. Charles Schwab died penniless after living on borrowed money for 5 years. Samuel Insull died broke in a foreign land. Richard Whitney went to Sing Sing prison. Albert Fall went to prison. Leon Fraser took his own life.
It's sobering.
Rich Dad uses this dark history lesson to hammer home a crucial point. It is not about how much money you make. It is entirely about how much money you keep and how many generations you keep it.
The Great Depression hit, the economic winds shifted, and their empires collapsed. Why? Because making money requires one set of skills, often related to ambition, networking, and taking massive risks. But keeping money requires an entirely different set of skills, financial literacy.
Making money without financial literacy is like trying to build a massive structure on a non-existent foundation, which gives us our next massive visual framework. Imagine you want to build a house out in the suburbs. What do? You pour a 6-inch concrete slab. It's quick, it's easy, it holds up a wooden frame just fine. But now, imagine you want to build the Empire State Building.
You cannot pour a 6-inch slab.
You absolutely cannot. You have to bring in excavators, dynamite, massive drills. You have to dig a cavernous, dark hole deep into the earth until you strike solid bedrock. Only then, once you are anchored to the bedrock, can you start building up toward the sky. The diagnosis that Rich Dad gives is that most people, in their drive to get rich, are trying to build the Empire State Building of wealth on a 6-inch slab of financial literacy.
They get a good job, they get a big salary.
And they immediately start building the skyscraper of luxury cars, massive houses, and expensive lifestyles. And the moment the wind blows a job loss, an unexpected medical bill, an economic downturn, a pandemic, the whole skyscraper topples over because there is nothing holding it down.
To prevent that collapse, you have to dig to bedrock. And digging to bedrock means understanding accounting. Now, let's be honest. Accounting is notoriously dense, dry, and boring. It is a language of numbers that most people find completely alienating.
It's terrible.
But Rich Dad employed the KISS principle, keep it super simple. He recognized that these were young boys, but frankly, his method is how most adults need to learn it too. He bypassed all the complex jargon, the depreciation schedules, the amortization tables. And he used stick figures, arrows, and brutal simplicity.
He distilled the entire foundation of wealth down to one unbreakable rule. You must know the difference between an asset and a liability, and you must spend your life buying assets.
And his definition is so gloriously simple, it challenges everything traditional accountants are taught.
Are you ready for it? And an asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. That is it. It doesn't matter what the bank calls it. It doesn't matter what your financial advisor calls it. If it puts money in your pocket, it's an asset. If it takes money out, it's a liability.
So elegant.
If you want to be rich, spend your life buying things that put money in your pocket. If you want to be poor or middle class, spend your life buying things that take money out of your pocket. No massive textbooks required.
While it sounds almost ridiculously simple, the stark reality is that the vast majority of people struggle financially because they simply do not understand this distinction. They buy liabilities, expensive cars, massive mortgages, designer clothes on credit, boats, vacation homes, and they falsely label them as assets because society or their banker tells them to.
To truly understand why this trap is so pervasive, we have to look beyond the definitions and visualize the flow of the money. We have to look at the numbers as a story.
A literal flowing story.
Yeah. When you look at that 6-inch slab versus the bedrock, it really comes down to how money actually moves through a household. Let's visualize that flow. Imagine we are looking at a giant glowing financial statement. You have an income box at the top, an expense box below it, then further down an asset box on the left and a liability box on the right.
Okay, I see it.
Now, imagine cash flow as a glowing pipeline of liquid gold. Let's trace the pipelines to see the stories they tell. For the financially poor person, it's a short, highly stressful pipe. The liquid gold flows into the income box from their daily job, and it immediately shoots straight down into the expense box. Rent, food, taxes, transportation, basic clothing, and it drains out entirely. It never even touches the bottom boxes. It never even touches the asset or liability columns. They are just surviving month to month.
Now let's look at the pipeline of the middle class, which the book argues is arguably the most dangerous and deceptive trap of all. This is the classic, heavily conditioned story of the highly educated, hardworking young couple.
Oh, the classic trap.
They get married, they both have good jobs, they have 2 incomes, and they feel wealthy. So what do? They follow the script. They decide it's time to buy their dream home. They finance 2 new cars to commute to their good jobs. They buy furniture on credit to fill the dream home.
They load up.
They route their glowing pipeline of income directly into the liability box. They acquire massive mortgages, auto loans, student debt, and credit card balances. The pipe goes from income down into liabilities and then forcefully drains out through the expense box to pay the interest, the taxes, the insurance, and the principal on all that debt.
It's a terrifying illusion of wealth. Their income is high, which makes them look rich to their neighbors, but their expenses rise right along with it, perfectly matching it. Every time they get a raise, they upgrade their lifestyle, increasing their liabilities. They are trapped on that topographical mountain, sweating profusely just to keep the liability service.
Just trying to outrun the boulder.
Exactly. And I'll be honest, this hits close to home. I remember getting my first real promotion, making more money than I ever had. And my first instinct, almost a biological urge, was to go lease a car I absolutely did not need.
Because you felt like you deserved it.
I justified it by saying, I earned this, it's an asset. But every month, that car payment took money out of my pocket. It was a liability dressed up as a reward.
It's a remarkably common experience because the societal pressure to display wealth is immense. But then we look at the financial statement of the rich. The wealthy pipeline is a beautiful self-feeding loop. The rich person's pipeline actually starts down in the asset column.
That's the key.
Real estate that generates rent, dividend-paying stocks, bonds, intellectual property like books or patents, or businesses that run without their daily involvement. That asset column acts like a massive automated pressure pump, shooting liquid gold straight up into the income box. Dividends, rental income, royalties. Their money is doing the sweating for them.
The ultimate goal, the bedrock of financial freedom, is to make the pipeline from assets to income so thick and powerful that it entirely covers the expense box. Once your assets generate more income than your monthly expenses, you are financially free. You never need to work a job again.
This shift from viewing your salary as your primary wealth generator to viewing your assets as your primary wealth generator requires a massive psychological rewiring. And this brings us to a crucial philosophical concept Rich Dad shared, drawn from Japanese culture: the 3 powers. The power of the sword, the jewel, and the mirror.
This is perhaps the most profound philosophical point in the early chapters of the text. Let's break down what each represents. The sword represents weapons and military might. Historically, great nations and empires have dominated through the sheer force of the sword.
The jewel represents money and financial power. It is the golden rule: he who has the gold makes the rules. But Richard Dad emphasizes that the most important, the most critical of the three powers is the mirror.
This raises an important question. Why the mirror? A sword can conquer a country. A jewel can buy an election. What can a mirror do?
The mirror represents the power of self-knowledge. It is the ability to see yourself clearly without the comforting illusions provided by society. It is the hardest power to master because human beings are biologically wired to seek safety in the herd. We want to do what our neighbors are doing. We want the validation of our peers.
It takes serious guts to look in the mirror. Let's spend some time on this because it's the linchpin of the whole philosophy. Looking in the mirror means you have to look at your glowing pipelines and be brutally honest with yourself. You have to ask yourself, does this make sense? Instead of just blindly following the herd.
Let's take the most controversial example from the book, the family home.
Oh boy. Sacred cow.
The herd says, your home is an asset. Your home is your biggest investment. Take on as much mortgage debt as the bank will allow because it's a tax break and real estate always goes up. That is the accepted wisdom.
But when you apply the mirror, when you force yourself to look at the cold, hard numbers of your personal financial statement, what do you see? You see that every single month, that house takes money out of your pocket. You pay the mortgage, you pay the property taxes, you pay the homeowner's insurance, you pay for the new roof, the landscaping, the utilities.
According to the Bedrock KISS definition we just established, if it takes money out of your pocket, it is a liability. Now, the book isn't saying don't buy a house. It is saying have the self-knowledge to call it what it is.
If you understand it as a liability, you will treat it differently. You might buy a smaller house. You might focus on buying income-producing assets first and using the cash flow from those assets to pay for the house. Breaking from the herd mentality requires immense self-knowledge and the willingness to look foolish to your peers.
That cognitive dissonance is staggering. Imagine realizing that the very thing you were told was your greatest financial achievement, your beautiful suburban home, is actually the boulder chasing you up the mountain. The lack of that mirror, the lack of self-knowledge, is exactly what drives people to act out of fear and greed.
They feel the fear of not having money or the fear of looking unsuccessful to their friends, so they conform. They get the safe job. They buy the house everyone says they should buy. They lease the car to fit into the corporate parking lot, and they never question the direction of their cash flow.
They never ask, who is getting rich off my labor? The answer is usually the bank collecting the interest, the government collecting the taxes, and the corporation collecting the profits.
Exactly. Financial literacy isn't just about reading a balance sheet. It's not just math. It's about having the psychological fortitude to not be the donkey chasing the carrot. It is about recognizing your own emotions, acknowledging the fear of standing out, and choosing to build a foundation of assets anyway.
The transition from the left side of those cash flow diagrams, the poor and middle class pipelines, to the right side, the wealthy pipeline, starts entirely in the mind. It starts with the vocabulary you use.
Okay, we have been sprinting at top speed through some truly paradigm-shifting concepts. We have covered massive mental shifts today. We watched a 9-year-old bear the heavy psychological burden of choosing his mental programming, actively deciding to ignore his highly educated father and replace "I can't afford it" with the mental resistance training of "How can I afford it?"
We learned how to spot the neon hamster wheel of the rat race and escape the donkey's carrot by recognizing our own fear and greed.
We build a comic book library to understand the crucial transition from trading time for money to building automated systems and pipelines. And we grab the heavy machinery to dig a bedrock foundation, drawing a brutal, unbreakable line between assets that put money in your pocket and liabilities that constantly drain it out.
It is a total paradigm shift. It requires moving from a reactionary state governed entirely by unexamined emotion and societal pressure to an analytical state governed by financial intelligence, strict definitions, and deep self-awareness. It requires looking in the mirror.
So, to you, the listener, let's make this real. Let's bring this right to your front door. Look at your own life right now. Look at your daily actions and your monthly bank statements. Are you pouring a 6-inch slab, buying liabilities, and just hoping the economic wind doesn't blow? Or are you digging down to bedrock, quietly acquiring assets?
When you face a financial hurdle today, Are you fueling a brilliantly active factory of ideas, or are you just yanking the main power switch and saying, I can't afford it?
The questions you ask yourself dictate the reality you build.
Completely.
So, what does this all mean? It means the traditional systemic path is optional. You do not have to be the donkey, but you have to choose to step off the path. And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over tonight.
Something to really sit with.
It's a thought experiment that builds on everything we unpacked today. Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and your primary source of income, your paycheck, your salary, your hourly wage has been entirely vaporized.
It is gone forever, and you can never get another job.
Look at your current financial setup. Look at your asset column. How many days could your current existing comic book library keep you alive before the boulder rolls over you?
That's a powerful question.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. Keep your mind engaged, keep your eyes open for the right pipelines, and start looking in that mirror. We will see you for part 2 of this journey. Stay curious.
Welcome back. We are officially in part 2 of our 4-part custom-tailored mini-series.
Taking a massive, thorough, deep dive into the foundational concepts of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Exactly. And if you were with us for part 1, you know we laid the groundwork. We stripped everything down to the absolute basics.
Right, the true definition of an asset versus a liability.
Getting out of the rat race and how the wealthy simply do not work for money.
Yeah.
But today is where we shift from defense to offense.
This is where it gets really fun.
It is. Our mission for this deep dive is a high-velocity sprint straight through chapters 3, 4, and 5 of the source material. We are picking up exactly where we left off.
Yeah, because part 1 was really about setting that foundation right. Unlearning the habits that the traditional school system drills into us.
Unlearning is the perfect word for it.
But today's deep dive crosses over into the structural mechanics of wealth. We are moving from basic personal finance into the actual architecture of how money is built, shielded, and multiplied.
We're getting into the cheat codes today.
Total cheat codes.
We are going to cover why you need to aggressively mind your own business, which, by the way, has absolutely nothing to do with neighborhood gossip.
Right.
We'll unpack how to use corporate structures to literally shield your money. And we're going to break down how the wealthy legally invent money out of thin air.
Which sounds impossible, but we'll show you exactly the mechanics of it.
So I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now. Whether you are an entrepreneur trying to get a startup off the ground, a dedicated employee working a 9 to 5, or just someone curious about how the world actually works behind the curtain. This deep dive is designed to rewrite how you perceive risk, reward, and the very nature of money itself.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
So let's get right into the concept of minding your own business, starting with this amazing story from 1974.
Yeah, it's a brilliant starting point because it attacks the concept of professional identity. The author uses a story about Ray Kroc, the legendary founder of McDonald's.
Picture this, 1974, Austin, Texas.
Right. Kroc had just finished giving a guest lecture to an MBA class at the University of Texas. And afterward, the students asked if he would join them at a local bar for a few beers.
Which is awesome.
He accepted. So you have this billionaire sitting in a dimly lit college bar with a group of eager MBA students. Kroc looks at them, taking a sip of his beer, and asks a deceptively simple question. He says, "What business am I in?"
They probably thought he was totally messing with them.
They laughed. They assumed it was a joke. I mean, it's Ray Kroc. Finally, one student speaks up and says, "Ray, who doesn't know that you're in the hamburger business?"
Which is the logical answer.
Exactly. Kroc chuckles and tells them he knew they would say that. Then he leans in, completely serious, and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not in the hamburger business. My business is real estate."
Boom. That is the moment the entire paradigm shifts. How does he even explain that to a group of business students who are literally studying his franchise model?
He breaks down his master plan for them right there. Kroc explained that the primary business focus was never the food itself. The hamburgers, the fries, the shakes, that was just the operational mechanism.
Debate.
Exactly, that was the profession of the individual franchise owner. Kroc's overarching business was acquiring the real estate under those franchises. He realized early on that true wealth wasn't in selling a 15-cent burger.
It was in owning the physical land at the most valuable intersections across America.
Yes. Today, McDonald's is one of the largest single owners of real estate in the world. They often own intersections that are more valuable than the Catholic Church's real estate.
That's insane when you think about it. And bringing this back to you, the listener, this perfectly highlights what the author calls the identity trap. It is the stark difference between your profession and your business.
The author argues that our entire educational system is built to focus entirely on preparing youth to get good jobs by developing scholastic skills. You study to become an engineer, a chef, a police officer.
And there's nothing wrong with those jobs.
Not at all. But the trap is that you adopt that profession as your total identity. When you do that, you spend your entire life minding someone else's business.
Right. You are generating wealth for the owner of the engineering firm, the restaurant owner, or the municipality, rather than building your own foundation.
Think of your profession, your day job, your salary, your title like a hamster wheel. You get on the wheel, you run, and that running generates the electricity that pays your monthly bills.
It keeps the lights on.
Exactly. But no matter how fast you run, you are still inside the wheel, generating power for a grid you don't even own. Your business, on the other hand, is the asset column you are building outside that wheel.
I love that analogy, because when you ask most people, what is your business? They respond with their profession. They say, I'm a banker. And if you ask them, oh, do you own the bank? They look at you like you're crazy and say, no, I work there.
They have completely confused their profession with their business. The core rule of Chapter 3 is that you must mind your own business. Financial struggle is almost always the direct result of people working their entire lives for someone else, leaving them with nothing at the end of their working days.
It honestly sounds like an insult when you first hear it, mind your own business.
It really does.
But it's actually a vital financial directive. Focus on your asset column, not your income statement. And the author provides a really visceral way to visualize this. Imagine every single dollar bill you earn as a tiny, tireless employee.
I love this concept. It completely changes how you view consumption. Instead of looking at a dollar as just a piece of paper to be spent on a liability, you look at it as a unit of labor.
A tiny little worker in a hard hat.
Right. And imagine you have a fortress. Once one of those dollar bill employees goes into your asset column, your fortress, the heavy iron doors lock shut behind it.
Clang. It's in there.
That dollar is never allowed to leave. Inside that fortress, that dollar is now working for you 24 hours a day. It doesn't sleep, it doesn't take lunch breaks, it doesn't unionize. It just works, creating more tiny employees, and it can do this for generations.
And this ties directly into the actionable advice the author provides. He is not advocating for everyone to immediately quit their jobs and become reckless entrepreneurs.
No, he explicitly says the opposite. Keep your daytime job, be a hardworking employee, run on the wheel to pay your living expenses. But simultaneously, aggressively, start minding your own business by taking your excess cash flow and buying real assets.
And let's underline the word real there. Real assets. Not liabilities masquerading as assets. Because what happens when someone gets a raise at their profession?
The immediate instinct is to upgrade their lifestyle.
Always. They go buy a new car.
But the author points out that a new car loses nearly 25% of its price the exact moment you drive it off the lot. It is not a true asset.
Even if your banker lets you list it on a loan application to pump up your net worth on paper.
Exactly. If you buy a set of titanium golf clubs for $400, they are worth $150 the moment you tee off. You are taking your tiny employees and literally destroying their value on the front lawn.
Which brings us to a really nuanced discussion about luxury. Because the author isn't suggesting you live a life of total deprivation, sitting in an empty room eating rice.
No, the distinction lies in when and how you acquire luxuries. The poor and middle class tend to buy luxuries first. They buy the big house, the jewelry, the boat, often on credit, because they want to appear wealthy.
It's a facade funded by debt and future labor, the classic trap of keeping up with the Joneses.
But the wealthy build the asset machine first, and the machine buys the toys.
Yes. There's a great story in the text about the author's wife, Kim. She wanted a new Mercedes, and they were doing well financially at the time. They could have easily gone to the bank, secured a car loan, and paid it off using their professional salaries.
But she completely refused to do that. She used her desire for the car to motivate her financial discipline. She focused entirely on the asset column.
She waited 4 whole years.
Over those 4 years, she systematically built up a real estate portfolio of apartment houses. She didn't purchase the Mercedes until the excess passive cash flow generated by those specific apartments was enough to entirely cover the monthly cost of the car.
Now let me push back on that for a second on behalf of the listener. Because waiting 4 years for a car when you technically have the cash flow from your salary seems agonizing. Why not just finance it and enjoy the car now while you build the assets in the background?
Because of the psychological weight of bad debt versus the psychological reward of an asset. When you buy a luxury on consumer credit, the debt becomes a burden. You are forcing your future self to work harder to pay for a depreciating item you bought in the past.
You're trapping yourself on the wheel.
Exactly. It creates anxiety. But when your asset column buys the luxury, it is a pure reward. Every time she drives that Mercedes, it proves she successfully grew her asset column. The apartments bought the car, she didn't use her own sweat. The asset remains, the cash flow remains, and she gets the car.
That reframes everything. So listener, ask yourself, what are your tiny employees doing right now? Are they locked in the fortress, acquiring apartment buildings and dividend stocks? Or are they being traded for depreciating liabilities that look good today but keep you trapped on the wheel tomorrow?
Making that conscious choice to populate the asset column is the true essence of minding your own business.
But as you build that asset column, you inevitably encounter the absolute largest obstacle to wealth accumulation.
Taxes.
Which transitions us perfectly into Chapter 4, where the author explores the history of taxes and the protective structures the wealthy use to shield their assets.
Now, quick pause here. We need to be crystal clear about something regarding the source material.
Yes, the impartiality warning.
Right. The author presents some very specific views on taxes, socialists, and capitalists. We are unpacking the author's specific historical philosophy here. We are not taking political sides. Left, right, center, we are entirely impartial. We are simply reporting on how this text frames the mechanics of wealth building and history.
Exactly. We are just the messengers of the deep dive. So the author frames the history of taxes as a massive historical backfire. We all know the story of Robin Hood, take from the rich, give to the poor.
The author argues that initially the masses supported the implementation of income taxes because they were sold on this exact Robin Hood theory. It was pitched purely as a way to penalize the ultra-rich and distribute that capital to everyone else.
According to the author's historical interpretation, in the United States and England, taxes were originally levied exclusively against the wealthiest citizens.
But here is the plot twist. The government's appetite for capital grew so voracious that the tax net had to be widened. Eventually, the government needed so much money to sustain its own massive growth in programs that the taxes trickled down to the very people who originally voted for them.
The middle class and the poor. So weight taxes weren't always a permanent fixture for the middle class.
Not income taxes, no. In the U.S., the 16th Amendment, which established the modern income tax, wasn't ratified until 1913. Before that, the government funded itself largely through tariffs and excise taxes. The income tax was initially pitched as a minor levy on the ultra-wealthy.
But as the author points out, once the mechanism of taxation was established, gravity took over. It expanded downward. The masses thought they were sticking it to the rich, but the wealthy didn't just accept this new financial reality.
They outsmarted the system. They used a massive legal loophole that had actually been around for centuries.
I want to paint a cinematic visual for the listener here. Transport yourself back to the 1500s. Picture these massive wooden sailing ships braving violent, uncharted oceans.
The age of exploration.
Right. Merchants are sending these ships through terrifying storms to look for spices and treasure. The risk was absolutely monumental. If a ship encountered a hurricane or got raided by pirates and sank, the entire investment was at the bottom of the ocean.
So the rich merchants and investors created a legal vehicle to mitigate this extreme personal risk. They formed early corporations.
An invisible shield.
Exactly. An investor would put a set amount of money into a corporation, and that entity would finance the voyage. If the ship was lost at sea, the investor only lost the specific capital they allocated to that voyage.
Their personal estate, their castles, their lands, their family wealth back on shore was completely shielded from the liability.
The corporation acts as a legal force field. The author points out that modern capitalists use their financial intelligence to find an escape from expanding tax laws by utilizing this exact same corporate shield.
But there's a massive perception gap here. When the average person hears the word corporation, they picture a giant glass skyscraper in Manhattan, or a massive factory with thousands of employees.
The modern reality of a corporation is often entirely invisible. It is literally merely a manila file folder containing legal documents sitting in an attorney's office registered with a state government agency.
It is a legal body without a soul.
Yet this invisible manila folder holds the key to the most significant advantage the wealthy have over the middle class.
Let's break down the visceral math on this, because this is the ultimate tax cheat code regarding pre-tax versus post-tax dollars. Let's look at how an employee operates versus how a corporation operates. If you are a W-2 employee, your financial formula is incredibly rigid.
You earn money, the government takes its portion in taxes immediately through withholding, and then you try to spend whatever is absolutely left over to live your life.
Earn, tax, spend. That's the employee formula.
The corporation operates in reverse. The corporate formula is earn, spend, tax. A business entity earns money, it spends absolutely everything it legally can on allowable business expenses, and then it is only taxed on the net profit that is left over.
And furthermore, the corporate income tax rate is frequently much lower than the individual income tax brackets.
The text gives examples of what a corporation can legally spend its pre-tax dollars on. Vacations can be structured as board meetings in Hawaii, provided legitimate business is conducted.
Vehicle leases, insurance repairs, health club memberships. These can often be categorized as company expenses.
The wealthy are legally using pre-tax dollars to fund aspects of their lifestyle while building their assets, whereas the employee is paying for all of those exact same things with money that has already been heavily taxed.
The author notes that it is far less expensive to pay the smartest legal and financial minds than it is to pay the government, because the bully isn't your boss, it's the tax man. Knowledge, specifically financial intelligence, is the power you need to fight back legally.
The text mentions Section 131 of the Internal Revenue Code as a prime example of a legal provision available to anyone, but utilized almost exclusively by those with financial education.
I hear real estate investors throw around the term 1031 exchange at parties all the time to sound smart. How does it actually function mechanically? What are the actual rules?
A 1031 exchange allows a real estate investor to defer paying capital gains taxes on the sale of an investment property if they reinvest the proceeds into a new property of equal or greater value.
Okay, let's use concrete numbers for the listener to visualize this. Imagine you buy a small rental property for $100,000.
Okay, $100,000. And over a few years, the area appreciates and you sell it for $300,000. Normally, you would owe significant capital gains tax on that $200,000 profit,
Which would severely eat into the capital you have available to go buy your next property. The government takes a massive bite.
Precisely. But if you execute a 1031 exchange, you use a qualified intermediary to hold the funds from the sale. You don't even touch the money. You then have 45 days to identify a new, more expensive property.
Let's say a $500,000 apartment complex.
Right. And you have 180 days to close on it. You roll your entire $200,000 profit into the new property as a down payment.
And the tax.
You pay zero capital gains tax at that moment. And you can keep doing this indefinitely, trading up into larger and larger assets, deferring the taxes forever until you eventually liquidate the portfolio or pass away.
You are infinitely rolling the money over, letting it compound, without the government taking a massive slice at every single transaction. It is a prime example of how the rules of the game are written to reward those who understand how capital flows.
This is why the author is deeply critical of the standard advice to just go to school and get a safe, secure job, because an employee with a safe job but zero financial aptitude has absolutely no escape from the tax burden.
The author's mentor constantly reminded him that knowledge is power. If you are ignorant, the system will naturally take advantage of you. If you know how the mechanics work, you have a fighting chance.
And to build this corporate force field and navigate things like 1031 exchanges, you need to develop what he calls your financial IQ. He breaks this down into 4 distinct pillars of synergy.
Let's do a rapid-fire breakdown of these 4 pillars. Pillar number 1 is accounting.
Accounting is the foundational financial literacy. It's the detail-oriented, left-brain ability to read and understand numbers. The author states that if you want to build an empire, this is a non-negotiable skill.
You have to know what you're looking at.
It is the ability to look at a financial statement, an income statement, and a balance sheet, and immediately identify the strengths, weaknesses, and true cash flow of any business or asset.
Because you cannot play the game if you can't read the scoreboard. Pillar number 2 is investing. This seems to be where the creativity comes in.
Investing is the science of money making money. This is the right brain element. It involves the strategies, the formulas, and the creative deal structuring. It's the art of taking those tiny dollar bill employees we talked about and deploying them into the markets where they will multiply the fastest.
Pillar number 3 is understanding markets.
This requires understanding the fundamental economic aspects of an investment, the actual science of supply and demand, but it also requires understanding the technical aspects, which are driven entirely by raw human emotion.
Fear and greed.
Always fear and greed. You have to ask, does this investment make sense in the current macroeconomic conditions? Who is buying, why are they buying, and who is panic selling?
And finally, pillar number 4, the law.
The law is the wrapper that holds the first three pillars together safely. This is the awareness of corporate, state, and federal regulations. It encompasses the tax advantages we discussed, as well as protection from lawsuits.
The text notes that we live in a highly litigious society. People love to sue.
They do. The wealthy hide their wealth using corporations and trusts. When someone attempts to sue a wealthy individual, they often find that the individual technically owns nothing.
They control everything through legal entities, but own nothing personally.
Making them a very, very difficult target for a lawsuit.
Wrapping the technical skills of accounting, investing, and market analysis inside a corporate legal structure is what creates explosive growth. The author compares the difference between an employee and someone who utilizes a corporate structure to the difference between someone walking and someone flying.
It's a completely different speed of travel.
So we've gone from minding our own business to wrapping our assets in a corporate force field. Now we are flying straight into Chapter 5, which is where the concepts get incredibly disruptive. The title of the chapter is The Rich Invent Money.
This section represents a major cognitive leap. The author posits that in the real world, it is rarely the smartest people who get ahead. It is the boldest.
Technical knowledge, the 4 pillars we just discussed, is necessary. But if a person's fear of losing money is too loud, their financial genius will be permanently crushed.
Let's look at the historical example the text provides regarding the Western Union blunder.
I love this story. Alexander Graham Bell patents the telephone. It's an incredible world-changing invention. But the demand immediately outpaces his small company's capacity. He needs a larger infrastructure.
So he goes to the absolute corporate titan of the era, Western Union. He offers them his patent and his entire company for $100,000.
In hindsight, that is one of the most remarkable bargains in all of commercial history. 100 grand for the telephone.
But the president of Western Union scoffs at him. He turns Bell down, calls the invention a toy, and says the asking price is ridiculous.
A toy. So Bell is forced to go it alone, and he ends up building AT&T, birthing a multi-billion-dollar global telecommunications industry. Why would Western Union turn that down? They had the capital.
They lacked the vision and the boldness to see the opportunity. They were comfortable with their existing monopoly on telegraphs.
They were playing it safe.
The author notes that as a teacher, it breaks his heart to see students who know all the right answers but lack the courage to act on them. When it comes to capital, most people are terrified. They want to play it completely safe. They cling to worn-out, obsolete life preservers instead of moving boldly into new paradigms.
Moving boldly is required because the very nature of wealth has evolved drastically. The author provides a stark visual progression of this evolution. 300 years ago, wealth was land. If you owned the land, you held the wealth.
Then we moved into the industrial age. Wealth shifted to factories and physical production. But today, the paradigm has shifted entirely again.
Today, we are in the information age. Wealth is information.
The defining characteristic of information is that it travels at the speed of light. It cannot be contained by physical borders or boundaries the way land or manufacturing plant can. The individual who possesses the most timely information and the boldness to act on it owns the wealth.
And this brings us to a concept that challenges the core of how most people operate. It's a total Matrix moment. The author's rich dad constantly told him, money is not real.
It's a heavy concept.
I struggle with this. When I pay my mortgage every month, that money feels incredibly real. When someone can't afford groceries, the lack of money is a very real physical problem. How do we reconcile money is not real with daily survival?
It is a difficult psychological hurdle. We spend our entire lives working for physical paper or digits on a bank screen, assuming those things have intrinsic, solid reality. But the author's pointing to the macroeconomic shift that occurred when fiat currency replaced the gold standard.
Money is no longer backed by a tangible asset.
Right. It is simply an agreement. It is an illusion of confidence. It is a blip on a trader's screen, moving from Lisbon to Toronto in a microsecond. The massive global economy stands entirely on the illusion of confidence and the trust in governments to honor debts.
The text argues that the more real you think money is, the harder you will sweat for it. If you believe money is a scarce, physical commodity that must be traded for hours of hard labor, you will spend your life laboring.
The poor and middle class work for money. The rich make money. If you can grasp the idea that modern money is essentially a construct, an agreement made up by human beings, you realize that your mind is your single most powerful asset.
A financially trained mind can recognize opportunities and create enormous wealth seemingly instantaneously out of nothing but ideas, agreements, and legal contracts.
Exactly.
I know someone listening right now is saying, okay, that sounds like great philosophical theory. Show me the actual mechanics.
Let's do.
Let's break down the exact playbook the author provides. The Phoenix real estate example. This is a deep dive into how he literally invented money out of thin air during an economic downturn.
This is an excellent case study in applied financial intelligence. The setting is the early 1990s in Phoenix, Arizona. The local economy is in shambles. The real estate market has crashed. Standard financial advisors are on television preaching doom and gloom, telling people to hoard their cash, play it safe, and wait out the recession.
But the author and his wife do the exact opposite. They view the panic as a massive clearance sale. They start looking for houses that used to be valued at $75,000, which are now sitting in bankruptcy courts.
Because the market is so depressed and devoid of buyers, they are able to negotiate the purchase of these homes for $20,000.
Step one is recognizing the fundamental value. They buy a depressed asset for a fraction of its true worth, using basic market awareness. But step two is where the quote-unquote invention of capital happens.
This is the genius part.
They have this house they bought for $20,000. They advertise it for sale, but they don't list it for the original $75,000 value. They offer it for a bargain price of $60,000.
A buyer comes along thrilled to get a $75,000 house for only $60,000. But here's the critical, mind-bending detail. The buyer does not go to a traditional bank to get a mortgage.
The author and his wife act as the bank.
This is called seller financing. No actual new money changes hands from a lending institution. The buyer pays a down payment, let's say $20,000, which immediately recuperates the author's initial cost to buy the house from the bankruptcy court.
So the author has now essentially acquired the property for zero net dollars out of pocket.
Zero. Then the author creates a $40,000 promissory note.
What exactly is the mechanical function of that note? Break it down.
A promissory note is simply a legally binding document, an agreement, where the buyer promises to pay the author the remaining $40,000 balance over a set period of time at a specific interest rate, let's say 10%.
A $40,000 asset was just created out of thin air. It is literally just a piece of paper, a legal agreement drafted by an attorney, but it functions as a highly valuable asset because it is throwing off 10% interest.
That is $4,000 a year in passive cash flow coming into their pockets from an asset they created purely with their minds and negotiation skills.
And the text notes, they did this 6 times in their spare time.
Let's run the math on scaling that operation. 6 promissory notes of $40,000 each equals $240,000 in created assets. The text uses a slightly different baseline for the final math, stating they created over $190,000 in assets.
Regardless of the exact baseline figures, the result is roughly $19,000 a year in passive ongoing income. And remember the corporate force field we discussed in Chapter 4.
Because they are financially intelligent, this income is sheltered inside their private corporation.
That $19,000 is paying for their company vehicles, their travel, their business meals, utilizing pre-tax dollars. Let's compare that to the hamster wheel. The author poses a devastating scenario. Which path sounds harder?
Option 1, work tirelessly at your day job. Pay up to 50% of your marginal earnings to the government in various taxes. Try to scrape together what's left. Try to save up $190,000 in a traditional bank account that earns maybe 4 or 5% interest, which the government will also tax every single year.
Soul-crushing. Or option 2, take the time to aggressively develop your financial intelligence, harness the power of your brain to overcome fear, buy a few foreclosure properties using the mechanics of seller financing, and invent the capital.
When laid out mechanically, option 1 requires decades of physical labor and extreme sacrifice. Option 2 requires a few years of applied education, networking, and boldness.
This perfectly illustrates the author's assertion that there are 2 fundamentally different types of investors in the global market. Type 1 is what I would call the retail shopper.
The author describes this as the most common demographic. This is a person who buys a pre-packaged investment. They call a stockbroker, a financial planner, or a real estate agent, and they buy something right off the shelf.
A mutual fund, a real estate investment trust, A standard index fund.
It is a clean, simple, and relatively passive way of investing.
It's like walking into an electronics store and buying a pre-built computer sitting in a cardboard box. It works, it's fine for basic tasks, but your upside is entirely capped by whoever built and priced the box.
Type 2, however, is the creator. The creator investor buys the individual components and pieces the deal together from scratch.
They construct the investment.
This requires significantly more technical skill, legal understanding, and market awareness. But as the author notes, this is where the exponential returns reside. To transition from a retail shopper to a creator, you must actively develop 3 critical skills.
Let's unpack those 3 skills because this is the blueprint for leaving the rat race entirely. Skill number 1. You must be able to see what others miss. You have to see with your mind, not your eyes.
The text provides a fascinating anecdote to illustrate this. A friend of the author bought a rundown, spooky-looking old house in a neighborhood. Everyone who looked at it thought he was crazy. They couldn't understand why he would sink money into such a dilapidated property.
But he saw something the rest of the market missed because he utilized the accounting and law pillars.
He went to the title company and did his research. He discovered that the spooky house actually came with 4 extra empty lots attached to the property deed that no one realized were there.
He didn't just buy a bad house. He bought a massive land play. He bought the package, tore the spooky house down, and sold the 5 empty lots to a residential developer for 3 times what he originally paid for the entire package.
He made $75,000 for a few months of organizing paperwork.
The average person's eyes saw a haunted house to avoid. His financially trained mind saw an underdeveloped zoning opportunity. Skill number 2, you must learn how to raise money.
Most people let a lack of personal capital stop them from investing. They find a great deal and say, I can't afford it. But the creator investor knows that investing is more a function of knowing than buying.
You must know how to fund a deal without necessarily relying on a traditional bank or your own savings account.
If you find a lucrative enough deal, the capital will find you. You syndicate it with other investors, or you figure out a creative way to structure it, like the seller finance promissory notes in the Phoenix example. You don't let the lack of immediate cash blind you to the opportunity.
And finally, skill number 3, you must know how to organize smart people.
Truly intelligent individuals are those who actively work with or hire people who are more intelligent than they are in specific domains. When you need advice on a complex deal, you don't ask your broke neighbor.
You rely on the smartest accountants, tax attorneys, and commercial brokers you can find. You act as the conductor. They are the orchestra playing the instruments.
The conductor of wealth.
We have covered a massive amount of conceptual and mechanical ground today. Let's briefly cool down and recap this high-velocity journey we just took through the source material.
It was a sprint.
We started by realizing the trap of the hamburger business, understanding that your profession is not your business and that you must fiercely build your asset column. We moved into the mechanics of the corporate force field.
Understanding how the tax code is written to benefit those who operate businesses and reinvest capital rather than those who simply earn a W-2 wage.
And finally, we entered the abstract but highly lucrative realm of inventing money, learning that capital is largely an agreement and that with high financial intelligence, you can structure deals that create assets out of thin air.
It requires a profound shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And to connect this all back to you, the listener, it is vital to remember why we are discussing these mechanics. The author makes it clear this isn't merely about accumulating a giant pile of money for vanity.
It is about acquiring options.
It is about developing the financial intelligence so that when the macroeconomic environment shifts, when a recession hits or an industry gets disrupted, you aren't terrified, clinging to a false sense of job security.
Instead, you remain calm. You possess the skills to identify the invisible opportunities, the houses with the extra lots, the bankruptcy bargains, that everyone else is walking right past because they are blinded by fear and a lack of education.
It's about securing freedom. Freedom from the anxiety of the hamster wheel.
And that brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you with today. We spent a lot of time discussing how money is an agreement, a legal construct built on confidence. If money is just an agreement made up by human beings, then what agreements are you currently making about your own worth? What invisible contracts have you subconsciously signed regarding your time, your energy, and your ultimate potential? Are you defaulting to the standard agreement of the rat race? Trading your finite life for a paycheck and handing a massive portion of it over in taxes? Or are you ready to draft a new agreement? Are you ready to step out of the retail store and become the creator? Think about that. Let the mechanics we discussed today sink in. We will see you back here for part 3. Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. We are officially at episode 3 of our epic 4-part mini-series where we're breaking down a truly massive stack of financial philosophy.
And has been quite the journey so far.
Oh, absolutely. If you are here with us right now, that means you have already survived the major paradigm shifts of the previous sessions. You know you've tackled the foundational and, honestly, often misunderstood difference between an asset and a liability.
Right, the real definition, not the one the bank gives you.
Exactly. And you've waded through the history of taxes and the sheer power of corporate structures. You have laid the groundwork. But today the mission changes entirely. We are going on a high-octane, dopaminergic sprint.
I like the sound of that.
We are charging relentlessly straight into Chapter 6, which is titled Work to Learn, Don't Work for Money, and then pushing right through the end of Chapter 7 on overcoming obstacles. So buckle up. We are taking abstract, dusty financial concepts, and we are injecting them with pure adrenaline.
What's fascinating here is how these two specific chapters pivot from external math to internal psychology. Up until this point, the text has been intensely focused on the mechanics of wealth. You know what you do with your wallet, how you read an income statement.
Like nuts and bolts.
Right, the nuts and bolts, how you legally structure a business to minimize tax liabilities. But as we move into this new section, the author essentially throws a massive wrench into the whole system. He argues that none of those external mechanics will save you if your internal operating system is broken. It's not just about what you do with your wallet, it's about hacking your own brain.
That is exactly where I want to start, because I want to hook you, the listener, directly right now. Have you ever felt like you are absolutely incredible at your job?
Oh, so many people feel this way.
Right. I mean, maybe you're the best in your department. Maybe you have multiple advanced degrees, you're highly respected in your field, but your bank account just does not reflect your talent.
It's a very real, very painful frustration.
It is. You are working yourself to the bone, perfecting your craft, and yet financially you feel like you're just treading water. Well, today we're going to fundamentally rewire how you view your own skills, and more importantly, how you view the darkest fears and psychological barriers that are keeping you exactly where you are.
The transition the author makes to explain this is brilliant because he uses a very specific real-world encounter. It's an encounter that perfectly encapsulates the tension between being highly educated and talented versus actually being wealthy.
Let's set the cinematic scene for this because it's so vivid. Picture a luxurious hotel lobby in Singapore. The author is sitting there giving an interview to a young, incredibly talented female reporter for a major Singapore newspaper.
And she is sharp. She has a master's degree in English literature.
Highly educated. And during the conversation, she confesses to him that her true dream, the thing she really wants, is to become a best-selling author. But she's struggling. Her novels are critically acclaimed. Her peers probably love her prose, but her books simply aren't selling. She wants his advice.
And the advice he gives her completely blindsides her. It's the inciting incident of this whole concept. He looks at her situation, recognizes her immense talent for writing, and very calmly suggests that she should go down the street to a local school and take a sales training course.
He tells her to learn how to sell.
Exactly. He recommends she learn sales.
And her reaction is immediate and deeply offended. She stiffens up. She asks him something like, "Are you seriously suggesting I go to school to learn to sell?" Okay, let's unpack this. Why is she so defensive? On the surface, it seems like practical business advice, but it strikes a massive nerve.
Well, we have to look at the exact wording the author points out on her own notepad. He physically points to the notes she is taking during their interview. He says to her, look at what you wrote down. You wrote Robert Kiyosaki, best-selling author.
Thus selling.
Right. He emphasizes the word selling. He tells her it says best-selling author, not best-writing author. And this triggers a massive wave of cognitive dissonance for this reporter.
It's a total clash of worldviews, isn't it?
Yeah,
she has spent her entire life, including years, earning a master's degree, perfecting the craft of writing.
Yes. Because in her academic environment, mastering the craft is supposed to be the only thing that matters. The underlying promise of traditional education is that if you write the best book or build the best product, the world will naturally reward you.
But the author is pointing out the harsh reality of the free market. The market rewards the system of selling just as much, if not more, than the craft itself. He freely admits to her that he is a terrible writer. He's not claiming to have the prose of Hemingway, but he went to sales school.
She is a great writer who refuses to learn sales. He tells her if you put your master's degree together with sales skills, you get a best-selling author and a best writing author.
But she's blinded by the idea that sales is somehow beneath her. She actually replies that advertising salespeople are crooks. She looks down on the very skill that would elevate her incredible talent and bring her work to the masses.
Which is such a common trap.
It is. And this brings us to a visceral analogy from the text. The concept that most people are just one skill away from great wealth. The author describes taking his car to a mechanic. The car is making a terrible noise. The young mechanic listens to the engine for just a few seconds, instantly diagnoses the problem, and fixes it in minutes.
A total genius with engines.
Brilliant, but he's broke.
Which leads right into a quote from a business consultant in the text who specializes in the medical trade. This consultant notes how many brilliant doctors, dentists, and chiropractors, people with years of intense specialized education and massive student debt, are struggling financially. The consultant says they are one skill away from great wealth.
One skill away. That is a staggering thought for the listener to internalize. You could spend over a decade in medical school and residency. You can literally perform complex surgeries, but because you lack one foundational business skill, you are stressed about paying your mortgage.
The tragedy is that talented, struggling people focus almost entirely on building a better product. If they want to make more money, their instinct is to go back to school to get another degree in their specialty. They hope that making themselves an even better doctor or a better mechanic will automatically translate to wealth.
But financial intelligence, according to the text, is a synergy.
Exactly. It's a combination of specific skills working together. The text explicitly names 4 pillars of financial intelligence. We have accounting, investing, marketing, and law.
Let's break those down really quickly.
Sure. So accounting is financial literacy. Can you read the numbers? Can you tell a profitable enterprise from a failing one? Investing is the science of money making money, the strategies and formulas. Marketing is communication and sales. Can you convince people to give you money for a product? And law is the awareness of corporate structures, tax advantages, and protection from lawsuits.
So the author argues that the poor and middle class generally only know one skill, which is how to work hard at their specific profession. The rich, however, synthesize multiple skills. They synthesize those 4 pillars.
Right. They don't have to be the absolute best writer or the absolute best mechanic in the world. They just need to be good enough at the craft while also having a working understanding of those 4 pillars.
So let's extrapolate this for you, the listener. Ask yourself honestly, are you grinding 80 hours a week, exhausting yourself, trying to perfect your specific technical skill, your writing, so to speak, while completely ignoring your selling? Are you so focused on being the best coder or the best graphic designer that you are actively refusing to learn the marketing or the accounting side of your own life?
Because the book suggests you are trapping yourself in a cycle of high effort and low reward. And to drive that point home, the author uses an analogy that perfectly highlights the curse of specialization.
Oh, I love this part. I'm going to throw the ultimate ADHD stimulating provocative question right at the listener. Can you cook a better hamburger than McDonald's? Think about it.
I know I can.
Almost everyone can. You can go to the grocery store, get high-quality ground beef artisanal buns, and make a burger in your kitchen that completely blows McDonald's out of the water. So here is the billion-dollar paradox. If you can make a better hamburger than McDonald's, why is McDonald's making billions of dollars and you aren't?
It's a brilliant question, and the answer is simple. McDonald's is not in the business of the perfect burger. They are in the business of business systems.
Yes, the systems.
Talented, poor people focus all their energy on the hamburger itself. Rich people focus on the delivery system, the real estate strategy, the supply chain, the marketing campaigns. The individual flipping the burger is just one tiny replaceable component of a massive wealth-generating machine.
And this brings us right back to the central tension of the entire text. The tale of 2 dads and their diametrically opposed views on education and specialization. Let's look at the highly educated poor dad's dogma first. His entire worldview was built around specialization.
Right, his advice was to specialize. Go to school, get a bachelor's degree, then get a master's, then get a PhD. Dig deeper and deeper into one microscopic niche. Traditional schooling literally rewards people who study more and more about less and less.
And there's a reliance on job security there, too. The text notes that poor dad relied heavily on union protection. And just to be clear, we are remaining strictly impartial here. We're just reporting the text's observation. Poor Dad viewed unions as a necessary safeguard for specialized workers who might not have skills that transfer easily to other industries.
Precisely, because when your scope is that narrow, you can't easily pivot. Now contrast that with Rich Dad's dogma. His philosophy was the exact opposite. Know a little about a lot.
Yes, he did not want his son to become a hyper-specialized cog in someone else's machine. He wanted him to own the machine. I mean, the author describes this grueling, hands-on curriculum his rich dad put him through, working as a busboy in the restaurants, then a construction worker on the job sites, then sitting in the accounting department.
And sitting silently in the back of the room during high-level meetings with lawyers and bankers.
Learning by osmosis. He wasn't trying to become a master accountant. He was learning the vocabulary, understanding the flow of the entire business ecosystem.
He was building that synergy of skills. Because when you only have one specialized skill and your only method of generating income is trading your time for a paycheck, you get trapped.
You become a hamster. Translate this into a visceral image for a second. Once people get trapped in the cycle of bill paying, they become hamsters spinning furiously in metal wheels. Furious motion, zero progress. Tomorrow morning, they're in the exact same financial position.
Because they are working strictly for money, they are not working to learn. Which is the crux of Chapter 6. It demands a complete mental shift in how you evaluate a job.
And the author gives some truly radical advice to adults here, advice that flies in the face of climbing the corporate ladder. He suggests getting a second job, not for the paycheck, but for the skills. Gym memberships for the brain, basically.
Yes. Specifically, he suggests joining a network marketing company just to face the terror of rejection and learn sales.
Which makes a lot of people cringe. Join a network marketing company. But he's not saying do it to become a millionaire selling vitamins. He's saying do it as a real-world classroom to build emotional resilience. But of course, people hate this advice.
They do. They throw out all the common hassle excuses. It's too much hassle. I don't have the time. I only do what I'm interested in.
And how does he respond to that?
He connects it to the gym metaphor. He says, I'm not interested in going to the gym, but I go because I want to feel better and live longer. The most painful part of going to the gym is the decision to go. It's the friction of getting off the couch. But once you're in motion, once you're there, it's actually a pleasure.
So the listener takeaway here is huge. Look down the road at what skills you want to acquire before getting trapped in the rat race. Your current job shouldn't just pay you, it should upgrade you. You need to look at employment as subsidized education.
Exactly. Work to learn, do not work for money. But here is where the text takes a dark turn. You can master all of this. You can understand the McDonald's system, learn accounting and sales, and still be completely broke.
We are hitting the brakes and then revving the engine right now. We are crossing the threshold into Chapter 7. Welcome to the financial underworld. You have the financial literacy. You know the synergy of skills. But there is a massive boss fight ahead.
A psychological boss fight. Because the author introduces 5 internal villains that block financially literate people from wealth: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, these aren't external economic factors. These are deeply human psychological traps. The text states point blank that the primary difference between a rich person and a poor person is simply how they manage fear.
So let's face villain number 1, fear. Specifically, the fear of losing money. Nobody likes losing money. But over 90% of the public plays not to lose rather than playing to win.
They play defense with their entire lives, avoiding any investment that carries a hint of risk. And the author brings in a fantastic NFL analogy here, quoting Fran Tarkenton. Winning means being unafraid to lose.
Let's break down the psychology of that. For losers, failure defeats them. They avoid it at all costs. But for winners, failure inspires them. Losing forces you to get better. You don't learn to ride a bike without falling off.
And he uses this incredible cinematic historical imagery to hammer this home. The Alamo. He paints the picture of Texans taking a miserable military failure, a complete loss of life, and turning it into a massive, emotionally charged rallying cry. Remember the Alamo.
They use the energy of the loss to fuel their eventual victory.
Contrast that with the average person who buys a duplex, loses a little money, gets a bad tenant, and is emotionally devastated. They swear off investing for life. They let a single failure define their financial reality instead of letting it inspire them.
They let fear win, which leads directly to villain number 2, cynicism, the voice of doubt, the sky is falling mentality.
The paralyzing what-if game played by friends, family, and our own brains. What if the market crashes? What if the economy goes into a recession?
The author calls this inner cynic Chicken Little. It immobilizes you.
I love the specific excuse the author brings up here because it is so classic in real estate. Whenever he mentions real estate, someone invariably says, I don't want to fix toilets. Okay, let's unpack this excuse.
Well, the author has a saying for this. Cynics criticize, winners analyze. When someone says they don't want to fix toilets, they're declaring that a toilet is more important than their financial freedom.
It's stunning when you frame it like that.
They let a minor I don't want block their ultimate I want. A winner analyzes. They say, okay, I don't want to fix toilets, so how do I build a financial model where the cash flow supports hiring a property manager? The cynic just shuts down.
So what is the ultimate dopaminergic mental image for solving this? What do you do with the Chicken Little in your head? You do what Colonel Sanders did. Harlan Sanders, at age 66, after losing his business, took his recipe and was rejected 1,009 times.
1,009 rejections at age 66. Most people quit after one.
But he didn't listen to the cynics. He built KFC. So what do you do with Chicken Little? You fry the chicken. You conquer doubt with relentless action.
Which brings us to villain number 3, laziness. But it's laziness disguised as busy.
This shatters a common myth, the illusion of the hustle. Busy people are often the laziest.
They stay late at the office to avoid fixing a failing marriage, or they're too busy watching TV or golfing to look after their wealth. It's avoidance behavior.
So what's the cure? Because the text prescribes something very controversial here. The cure is a little bit of greed.
WIIFM, what's in it for me? Without a little bit of desire for a better life, progress is impossible.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This leads to a war of words inside our heads. The author actually bans a specific phrase. The banned phrase is, I can't afford it.
Because it's a lie. And when you say it, your brain goes to sleep. It instills helplessness. You let yourself off the hook.
So the hack, the mental shift, is changing the statement into a question. How can I afford it?
The moment you ask, how can I afford it, your brain is forced to work. It opens up possibilities. It's a visceral internal battle. Your human spirit screams, let's get rich. Let's figure this out. But the lazy mind whines rich people are greedy. I'm too tired. We use guilt, like money doesn't grow on trees, to suppress our natural desire for a better life.
You have to force your brain to answer the question, which ties into villain number 4, bad habits, and specifically the concept of the pressure cooker.
The author points out the irony of education. Our lives reflect our habits, not our education. You can have a PhD in finance and be broke if your daily habits are poor.
Visualize the text's imagery here. The 98-pound weakling. If you pay everyone else first, the taxes, the bills, the landlord, and yourself laster, you are the 98-pound financial weakling getting sand kicked in your face by bill collectors.
You are yielding to their pressure. So the counterintuitive strategy referencing the richest man in Babylon is the pay yourself first rule. Rich dad pays his asset column first, even when he is short on cash to pay his creditors.
Wait, but let's look at the reality of this. What happens when the taxman and creditors come screaming? If I put my money in my asset column and can't pay my mortgage, aren't they going to ruin my life? This sounds reckless.
It sounds reckless, but here is the genius of the pressure cooker. You let the pressure build. You do not dip into your savings. You let the screaming creditors create an immense psychological pressure cooker that forces your brain to hustle.
So you're intentionally creating a crisis to motivate yourself.
Exactly. You use the fear of creditors as motivation to get smarter, to start a side business, to innovate and find the money. If you paid them first, you'd feel no pressure. You'd just accept being broke. The rich defend their asset column like a fortress.
It requires incredible self-discipline, which leads to our final obstacle. Villain number 5, arrogance. I'll just drop the math right here. Arrogance equals ego plus ignorance.
The trap is perfectly summarized by the quote, "What I know makes me money. What I don't know loses me money." People use arrogance to confidently shout over the fact that they don't understand a financial statement or an investment.
Listener, check in right now. Check your own ego. When someone talks about a new financial concept, a real estate syndication or whatever, do you scoff and say, that's a scam just because you don't understand it?
That is ego masking ignorance. A truly intelligent person welcomes new ideas because they know listening is more important than talking.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground. Let's synthesize this sprint. We brought the velocity up, and now let's bring it down. We moved from the necessity of mastering multiple systems like McDonald's breaking out of hyper-specialization to doing brutal hand-to-hand combat with our own psychology.
Right, conquering fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. Connecting this back to you, the listener, your mind is the most powerful asset you have. Are you feeding it the I can't afford it poison, or are you putting it in the pressure cooker to grow?
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. A mind-bending question, inspired by the text but pushing it further. We've talked about banning the phrase, "I can't afford it" when it comes to money. But what if you applied that to time?
Oh, that's powerful. Time is finite.
Next time your brain tells you, "I don't have the time to learn a new skill," or "I'm too busy to study investing," stop. Do not let the brain go to sleep. Ask yourself, how can I afford the time? Watch what your brain does to your schedule.
It will instantly start generating solutions. It will find the wasted hours and carve out the space you need.
I want to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. We have one final episode left in this mini-series where we bring it all together. Keep your brain exercised, keep asking how, and keep analyzing. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are stepping into the fourth and final installment of this mini-series today.
Yeah, the grand finale.
Exactly. Over the last 3 sessions, we've been on quite the journey with you. We've deconstructed the foundational theories of wealth, walked through the history of how our modern financial system actually operates, and, completely dismantled that traditional industrial age money mindset. But today, we are shifting gears.
We really are. We're bringing it all home.
Right. We are entering the execution zone.
And that transition is crucial because, theory is wonderful, but without execution, it's really just intellectual entertainment.
Just a fun mental exercise.
Exactly. So today we are looking at the final chapters of Robert Kiyosaki's core material, moving from the end of his first book straight into the cash age flow quadrant, along with adjacent texts like Joel Moskowitz's The 16% Solution. The goal today is to look at the raw mechanics of action. We are exploring how these sources suggest waking up that financial aptitude that supposedly lies dormant inside of you and rewiring your brain for speed, action, and undeniable results.
Okay, let's unpack this. The ultimate premise of these final chapters rests on a pretty bold claim. The text says there is gold everywhere. Most people are not trained to see it.
Mm-hmm.
The suggestion is that wealth isn't hidden away in some secret vault, right? Our vision is just obstructed. But how exactly does the source material justify that? Because to the average person working a 50-hour week just to make rent, that claim can sound a bit dismissive.
Oh, it can sound incredibly dismissive. Mechanisms behind it. The texts argue that we are culturally conditioned, almost hypnotized, really, to believe that money is inherently scarce, that traditional jobs are the only safe harbor, and that the only reliable path to advancement is just, putting your head down and working harder.
Right, the classic rat race.
Exactly. They argue that we are literally surrounded by deals of a lifetime. But because our traditional schooling trains us to look exclusively for a steady paycheck, our brain's reticular activating system simply filters out the opportunities.
Let's actually pause and define that, because the reticular activating system, the RAS, is a fascinating piece of biology.
It really is.
It's a bundle of nerves at our brainstem that filters out unnecessary information so the important stuff gets through. Like if you buy a red Honda Civic, suddenly you see red Honda Civics everywhere.
At every stoplight.
Right. You didn't magically manifest them into existence. Your RAS just decided that information is now relevant to your survival or your environment.
Precisely. And the source material applies that exact biological reality to finance. If your RAS is programmed by your environment and your schooling to look for, quote, safe jobs with good benefits, it will expertly filter out real estate opportunities, business acquisitions, or market inefficiencies.
It just deletes them from your worldview.
It does. You will walk right past a lucrative foreclosure on your own street and only notice the help wanted sign in the window next door. Today is entirely about reprogramming that filter.
Which brings us to the first major hurdle the source material identifies in this execution phase, igniting the engine. They call it finding a reason greater than reality. And this speaks to the power of spirit. The argument is that logic alone just isn't enough to build wealth.
It's an insistence that pure, cold logic is entirely insufficient. You can know all the math, you can understand all the accounting principles and tax codes, but if you don't have a deeply emotional, visceral reason driving you, the friction of reality will stop you cold.
Building an asset column is hard work.
It's brutal. The setbacks, the sheer effort required after you've already worked a full 8-hour day, it's heavy. Without an emotional anchor, the brain defaults to the path of least resistance. It will choose the couch and Netflix over analyzing a spreadsheet every single time.
It's like nitric oxide in a race car.
Yeah.
A polite, logical desire to have $1 million doesn't cut it. The text mentions combining your deepest I wants with your most aggressive "I don't wants." And I find it so interesting that they place so much emphasis on the negative here.
Well, the I don't wants are often much more powerful because they tap into our primal survival
The
instincts.
avoidance of pain.
Yes. The author notes his own driving forces, things like, I don't want to work all my life, I don't want to be an employee, or very specifically and viscerally, I don't want to fix toilets.
Yeah, that one is very specific.
But it works. It's that profound aversion to a life of drudgery or a lack of autonomy that creates the initial propulsion. You pair that intense frustration with the I wants, wanting total control over your schedule, wanting to fund your children's education without stressing over the bill. When you combine deep frustration with intense desire, you create a psychological drive that a simple logical goal just cannot replicate.
Okay, so once someone have that emotional engine firing, how do they actually steer the car? Because the texts frame the next step not as some grand, once-in-a-lifetime career pivot, but as daily micro-decisions. Every single dollar placed into your hand is categorized as a definitive choice regarding your financial future.
This is where we get into the raw power of choice. Choice is the ultimate expression of free will in a market economy. The text points out a staggering metric here. 90% of the population buys televisions, while only about 10% buy business books or invest in educational seminars.
That is wild.
That single metric is used to explain the wealth gap more clearly than almost any complex economic policy.
You brought up a story from the text earlier that perfectly crystallizes the story about the burglar.
Oh, right. The author shares the story about a friend whose apartment was burglarized. The thieves came in and completely cleaned her out of her electronics. They took the TV, the gadgets, the stereo system.
Everything with a plug.
Exactly, but they left all of her books sitting right there on the shelf, untouched.
The thieves perfectly mirrored the consumer habits of the broader society.
They absolutely did. They valued depreciating, distracting gadgets over the appreciating asset of knowledge. They physically carried away the liabilities and left the actual wealth-generating tools behind. When the text demands that you invest first in education, it is demanding that you consciously choose what you put into your brain before you choose what you put into your living room.
Because your mind is the only true asset you have.
Exactly. Everything else is just a derivative of how you use your mind.
Which flows directly into protecting the inputs of that asset. If your mind is the engine, the people around you are the environment. The next step is about choosing friends carefully, the power of association. Now, the text clarifies that you shouldn't choose friends based on their net worth, but it does insist you pay absolute attention to their vocabulary.
What's fascinating here is how vocabulary reveals mindset. Your peer group acts as a subconscious financial thermostat. They set the temperature of what is normal, what is possible, and what is an acceptable level of risk.
Yeah, so.
Well, the author notes that his wealthy friends talk about money, deals, and market opportunities constantly. And crucially, they aren't doing it to boast. They do it out of a genuine intellectual fascination with the mechanics of capital.
But the text also talks about struggling friends, the ones trapped in the rat race, who view discussing money as taboo or crass or unintellectual. If we aren't supposed to abandon those friends, how are we supposed to navigate that dynamic?
You learn from them by observing what not to do. You observe how their refusal to discuss wealth, or their constant use of phrases like, I can't afford that, actively limits their options. And conversely, you absorb the pattern recognition of the wealthy by associating with them.
It's contagious.
Completely. If your social circle panics at the idea of a market downturn, you will naturally feel panic. If your circle views a market downturn as a generational buying opportunity and an intellectual puzzle, you will start seeing it that way too. It's about managing your exposure to fear-based language versus opportunity-based language.
Let's talk about the speed of acquiring these opportunities, because the text places a massive emphasis on velocity. The standard societal formula we are all taught is get up, go to work, pay bills, buy some mutual funds, and wait 40 years. The source argues for mastering a formula and then rapidly learning a new one.
It argues that the standard recipe is totally antiquated for the information age. The speed at which you learn and apply new formulas is your primary leverage. The text shares the story of the author in his mid-20s taking a weekend class on how to buy real estate foreclosures.
A weekend class.
Right. That class represented a new formula, but learning the theory wasn't the victory. The victory was the disciplined execution of it.
He spent 3 years relentlessly mastering that single art of buying foreclosures while still working his day job.
Exactly. He exploited that formula. He squeezed every drop of value out of it. But the key takeaway is that once you master a formula, you don't just stagnate. You rapidly move to the next one. It's an aggressive, continuous acquisition of new income-generating recipes.
So if you're tired of what you were doing, or if your current income isn't meeting your goals, the text's diagnosis is blunt. You are using a slow formula.
You need to find a new recipe and execute it fast.
But execution requires discipline. Which brings us to one of the most controversial and, honestly, brutal parts of the source material. The crucible of self-discipline. The text calls this the ultimate delineating factor between the wealthy and everyone else. It argues that without internal fortitude, the world simply bullies you.
The world pushes people around not out of malice, but because the individual lacks internal boundaries. If you have a low tolerance for financial pressure, you will always cave to the demands of the immediate moment rather than protecting your long-term wealth. This is where the concept of pay yourself first is introduced not as a gentle suggestion, but as an ironclad rule.
I really want to dig into this because most people hear pay yourself first, and they think of it as a cute savings tip, like automatically transferring $50 into a high-yield savings account.
Right, a little rainy day fun.
But in the context of this book, it is a ruthless, non-negotiable routing of cash into your asset column before a single bill or utility is paid. It is an aggressive act of financial self-defense.
Yes. If you look at the cash flow diagram of someone who pays everyone else first, their income hits their bank account and immediately flows down into the expense box. They pay the landlord, the taxman, the credit card company, the grocer. Then, if there is a tiny trickle left over, they might direct it toward an asset.
Which there rarely is.
Exactly. But the diagram of the wealthy operates inversely. The income hits, and immediately the capital is diverted into asset column to buy investments or fund businesses. Only after the asset column is fed do they use what is left to pay their expenses.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because this is where the text introduces what I like to call the pressure cooker. And frankly, it sounds incredibly reckless.
Let's hear it.
The source says that if you pay yourself first and you come up short on your expenses, you literally don't have enough to pay your bills, you should let the pressure build. Do not dip into your savings. Do not liquidate your assets. Let the bill collectors howl.
It is highly controversial, and it flies in the face of conventional financial advice.
Right. Most people would argue that ignoring your bills destroys your credit score. And if you destroy your credit score, you can't get a mortgage to buy the real estate the book is telling you to buy. How does the source reconcile that? Why intentionally invite the terror of bill collectors?
It's a vital question. To understand this, you have to look at the underlying psychology the author is trying to forge. If you drain your savings to pay a sudden expense, you have released the psychological pressure by cannibalizing your own future. You've taught your brain that it's acceptable to eat your seed crop.
You've taken the easy way out.
Exactly. But if you refuse to touch your assets, you force yourself into a pressure cooker. The fear and adrenaline of those unpaid bills are harnessed to spark your financial ingenuity.
So you are basically manufacturing a crisis to force yourself to hustle.
In essence, yes. You train your nervous system to use financial pressure as a trigger for innovation. Instead of pressure causing a collapse, it causes an expansion. You are forced to figure out a side hustle, sell something, or create a new revenue stream to satisfy the creditors without touching your asset column.
What about the credit score argument, though?
Well, as for the credit score, the true investor, which we will discuss shortly, often bypasses traditional consumer credit entirely. They utilize commercial loans based on the cash flow of the asset itself, or they use seller financing. The author is less concerned with maintaining a pristine consumer credit score for a personal liability, and way more concerned with forging the unshakable mental toughness required to operate as an entrepreneur.
That reframing is wild. You are using the world's bullying to forge your own mental resilience.
Yeah.
And once you have that resilience, you can start looking at how capital actually flows. This brings us to the concept of luxuries and heroes.
Step 8.
Right. The rule here is use assets to buy luxuries. There's a story in the text about a 16-year-old kid who wants a car.
It's a brilliant illustration of this exact rule. So the teenager wants a car, and his friend's parents are all buying their kids' cars or co-signing loans. The path of least resistance, the standard middle-class path, is to just buy the car on credit or let the kid drain his savings from a part-time job for a down payment.
Which is what 99% of people do.
Right. But the father in this story does something entirely different. He gives his son $3,000, but with a strict stipulation, he cannot use it to buy the car directly.
He has to invest it in the stock market.
Correct. He tells his son he must trade, build the portfolio up, and he can only buy the car with the profits generated from that initial 3,000.
And the mother is terrified. She asks, what if he loses all the money?
And the father's response is the crux of the entire lesson. He says he would rather have his son lose everything now at 16 than wait until he is their age to risk losing everything. He views it as the best $3,000 he could possibly spend on his son's education.
Because the stakes are lower.
Exactly. If the boy loses it, it's cheap life tuition. If he succeeds, he learns the actual mechanics of wealth creation.
So the golden rule is established right there. You do not use your own sweat, your own labor, or your own principal to buy luxuries. You build an asset, and the asset's income buys the luxury.
Yes.
The average person buys a luxury car with their blood, sweat, and future time. The wealthy buy the luxury car with the dividends generated by their real estate, businesses, or stock portfolios. The asset is essentially the employee that goes to work to buy the boss a new toy.
And understanding that flow of capital seamlessly transitions into another counterintuitive step in the text, the power of giving.
Step 10.
Right. In a book entirely focused on ruthless wealth accumulation and asset building, it strongly advocates for tithing and charitable giving. The principle is, if you want something, you first need to give.
It does seem contradictory. If the goal is to trap every dollar in your asset column like a pressure cooker, why give it away?
Because it perfectly aligns with the overarching theme of the text cash flow. Notice the word flow. Capital is a current, it must move. Holding onto money out of pure fear acts as a dam. It stagnates the flow.
It blocks the energy.
Exactly. Giving, whether to a community organization, a charity, or an educational cause, opens the psychological and practical pathways for more to return. It forces you to operate from an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset.
Because if you give it away, you're telling your brain, I have plenty.
Precisely. It signals to your own brain that there is more than enough out there, which lowers your baseline anxiety and actually increases your cognitive ability to spot new opportunities.
It keeps the monetary cardiovascular system pumping. Okay, so we've covered the mindset, the choices, the pressure, the flow of capital. Now the text transitions into actionable velocity, the to-do list. And the very first item on that list is blunt. Stop doing what isn't working.
It requires a brutally honest assessment of your daily actions. If your current routine, waking up, commuting, working, paying bills, is only yielding exhaustion and stagnation, you must break the pattern. You have to actively seek out new ideas.
The definition of insanity, right?
Right, doing the same thing and expecting different financial results.
The author gives a very specific example of this. He talks about finding a book in a bookstore called The 16% Solution. He doesn't just read it and put it back on the shelf. He buys it, reads it, and executes the exact strategy outlined in the book by the very next Thursday.
Talk about velocity.
Right. But the text doesn't spend a ton of time explaining what that strategy actually is. What exactly is the 16% solution? Because to a skeptical listener, earning a guaranteed 16% sounds like a late-night infomercial scam.
It's a great point to clarify because understanding the mechanics actually validates the theory here. The 16% Solution is a real book by Joel Moskowitz, and it's entirely about investing in tax lien certificates.
Okay, how does that work?
It relies on local government infrastructure. Municipalities, counties, and cities rely on property taxes to fund schools, police departments, and roads. When a homeowner fails to pay their property taxes, the county faces an immediate budget shortfall.
They can't pay the police.
Exactly. To immediately recoup that money, the county will auction off a tax lien certificate to private investors. The investor pays the owed taxes to the county. In exchange, the investor holds a lien against the property.
So the county gets its money to keep running, but what does the investor get?
Well, the homeowner now owes the investor, not the county, and the state mandates a penalty interest rate that the homeowner must pay to clear that lien. Depending on the state, this interest rate can be anywhere from 8% to 36%. In Moskowitz's book, the focal point is states offering 16%.
Okay.
If the homeowner pays the tax bill, the investor gets their principal back plus that high interest. If the homeowner defaults entirely and never pays, the investor has the legal right to foreclose and take ownership of the property for just the cost of the back taxes.
That is incredible. It's a formula where the local government essentially enforces your investment return. But the detail I love in the text is that when the author decided to execute this tax lien strategy, he mentioned it to his neighbor. And the neighbor immediately told him it wouldn't work, that it was too risky, and that he shouldn't do it.
And the author asks the neighbor, have you ever done it?
Right.
The neighbor says no. So the author completely ignores the advice. It goes back to the power of association. Why do we take financial advice from people who are hauling the same heavy buckets we are? Why let someone who has never executed a formula talk you out of trying it?
Which brings us perfectly to the ultimate thesis wrap-up of this entire miniseries, the grand finale. Everything we've discussed over these 4 episodes culminates in understanding the fundamental difference between earned income and passive income, and how that difference maps onto the cash flow quadrant.
This is the matrix of the entire philosophy. The government structures societal behavior through the tax code. It incentivizes what it wants and penalizes what it doesn't. And the tax code is brutally simple in its foundational hierarchy. It taxes earned income, the money you work for with your own physical sweat, at the highest possible rates.
It punishes labor.
Essentially, yes. Conversely, it taxes passive income and portfolio income, the money your assets generate, at the lowest rates.
So financial freedom is solely defined by one metric, the velocity at which you can convert your highly taxed earned income into lowly taxed passive or portfolio income.
Exactly. And to visualize this game, the text introduces the cash flow quadrant E, S, B, and I. It's a cross that divides the financial world into 4 sections. On the top left, you have E for employee. On the bottom left, you have S for self-employed or small business. On the top right, B for big business owner. And on the bottom right, I for investor.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you, our listener, are likely familiar with these acronyms. But let's look at the nuance here, because the distinction between the left side and the right side is profound. Schools universally train us for the left side. They train us to be an E, go get a safe job with a corporation, or an S, go be a highly specialized doctor, lawyer, or consultant.
And the trap of the S quadrant is particularly fascinating because society views the S as the pinnacle of success.
The doctor with their own practice.
Right, the brilliant independent contractor. They think they own a business, but the text argues they don't own a business, they own a job. In the S quadrant, your income is entirely dependent on your own physical labor and specialized knowledge. If the dentist goes on vacation for a month, their income drops to 0.
They are trading time for dollars. It might be a lot of dollars per hour, but it's still a 1-to-1 ratio. And often they are taxed the highest because they bear the burden of both the employer and employee tax contributions without the massive deductions available to the right side of the quadrant.
Precisely. And the psychological barrier keeping people in the S quadrant is perfectionism.
The if you want it done right, do it yourself mentality.
Exactly. They cannot delegate because they don't trust anyone else to do it as well as they can. Therefore, they become the primary bottleneck to their own scale.
But the right side, the B and the I quadrants, operates on completely different physical and psychological laws.
A B quadrant business owner owns a system. They hire people from the E and S quadrants to operate that system for them. An I quadrant investor owns assets, and their money works for them. On the right side, income is completely decoupled from physical time.
Henry Ford is a classic example of a B.
Oh, absolutely.
He didn't need to be the smartest engineer in the room. He organized a mastermind of experts to build the system.
And the tax code favors the right side because the right side provides what the government desperately needs, jobs and housing. The B creates employment, so the government gives them tax breaks. The I provides capital and real estate, so the government gives them depreciation benefits and lower capital gains rates.
It is an entirely different rule book.
It really is.
So to really drive this home, to make this shift from the left side to the right side hit you right in the chest, the text provides the climactic metaphor of the entire philosophy. The story of hauling buckets versus building pipelines.
It is the perfect cinematic climax to everything we've discussed.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Oh, okay.
So what does this all mean? Picture a remote village that desperately needs a consistent water supply. The village elders hire 2 guys to solve the problem, Ed and Bill.
Okay.
Ed takes the traditional left side of the quadrant route. He goes out, buys 2 heavy galvanized steel buckets, walks a mile to the nearest lake, fills them up and hauls them back to the village cistern. He works from dawn until dusk. He is sweating, his hands are calloused and blistered, his back is aching, but he's making money every single day based on how many trips he can make.
Ed is the ultimate E or S. He is working incredibly hard, and he is providing a valuable service. But he is physically trapped. If he sprains his ankle, the village goes thirsty, and his income immediately stops.
He is the bottleneck. And then there is Bill. Bill disappears for months. He doesn't buy buckets. Instead, he sits down and drafts a business plan. He creates a corporation. He finds investors. He employs a construction crew. He spends his time engineering and building a heavy-duty, high-volume pipeline from the lake directly into the center of the village. During this entire construction phase, Bill makes absolutely no money. He is absorbing risk and expending capital.
But the magic happens upon completion.
Exactly. When the pipeline is finally finished, Bill turns on the spigot. The water flows perfectly, cleanly, and in massive volumes. And the best part, the water flows whether Bill is working, eating, traveling, or sleeping. He built a system.
Ed hauled buckets. Bill built a pipeline.
So what does this all mean for you? It is the ultimate question that every listener has to ask themselves as we wrap up this deep dive. Look at your daily routine. Look at how you generate your income. Are you hauling buckets, or are you building a pipeline?
That's the question.
Are you just trying to grab a slightly bigger bucket by negotiating a 5% raise at work? Or are you taking the time after hours to lay the steel pipes of an asset column?
Transitioning from the left side of the quadrant to the right side is entirely about moving from hauling buckets to engineering a pipeline. It requires the emotional engine we discussed, the vocabulary of the wealthy, the discipline of the pressure cooker, and the willingness to rapidly learn new formulas.
We need to bring this high-octane sprint to a grounded halt for a second. As we close out this incredible four-part journey, the source material leaves us with a quote from the Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh: "The path is the goal."
It is a profoundly grounding moment in a book that is otherwise entirely about money and speed. Because finding your path in the quadrant is not ultimately about your job title or even your net worth. Finding your path is about discovering what you were actually put on this earth to do. The financial freedom we've analyzed, the pipelines, the tax lands, the asset columns, they aren't the final destination. They are simply the mechanical vehicles that buy back your time and energy so you can actually walk your true path without the leash of financial terror pulling you backward.
You're engineering your financial life so you can actually live your real life. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought that builds on everything we've just discussed. Something the original text couldn't have fully anticipated back when it was written.
Okay.
We talked extensively about building pipelines, businesses, real estate systems. But look at the landscape we're entering right now with the explosion of artificial intelligence.
Oh, that changes the variables significantly.
Completely. If an AI can code a software system, generate marketing content, manage customer service, and analyze market data in seconds, what does a pipeline look like in the next 10 years? Does the nature of passive income fundamentally shift when the system you own isn't made of employees or physical real estate, but of highly autonomous digital agents?
It's a staggering thought. The barrier to entry for building a B quadrant business is dropping to near zero.
Right. Are we entering an era where anyone can build a global pipeline from their laptop in a single weekend? And if so, how quickly do you need to learn that new formula before the rest of the world catches on?
It's an incredible evolution of the quadrant to consider. The tools change, the speed changes, but the underlying necessity of choosing to be the architect rather than the laborer remains exactly the same.
Look at the very next dollar that enters your hand today. You are holding a brick. Will you use it to buy a momentary distraction that vanishes by tomorrow, or is that the exact dollar you will use to lay the first piece of your pipeline? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks for joining us on this Name Dive. Go build your pipeline.